Welcome to Balancing the Ledger, where tech and finance intersect. I'm Jeff Roberts.
And I'm Robert Hackett.
Today we're delighted to welcome Laura Shin, host of the Unchained and Unconfirmed podcast. Thanks for coming, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
One thing I was wondering when I got here, how did you become the crypto journalist, Laura?
Well, first of all, I don't know if I would call myself that, but I was a contributor at Forbes, and I was covering personal finance, and it was something I'd covered for a while, so I was getting kind of tired of it. I felt like I was writing the same articles over and over again, and I mentioned that to them, that I'd like to do something different, and so they said, oh, we have this idea to do a FinTech 50 list. Why don't you lead that with another reporter? So she and I just divided it into subcategories, and I took digital currencies and then just became really obsessed. And I think it's actually a good contrast to personal finance, which isn't a subject that changes a lot, and this one obviously is changing probably faster than any of us can keep up. So in that sense, I think it's actually a good fit for my personality.
Was it totally by chance that you happened to get the digital currency section, or was there you have some background in it? Did you come across it in other, in your past and have an affinity for it?
Yeah, so I've told this story before, but it's kind of funny. I actually heard about Bitcoin for the first time in 2011, but the person who explained it to me made it sound to me like essentially people just kind of solve math problems with like pen and paper at their computer, and then they can win these like what I thought were video game coins. That's literally how the description somehow, was interpreted in my brain.
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah, then years later, I learned a little bit more, and I did write about it a little bit, so I did have some curiosity, but yeah, didn't fully understand that world until it was actually 4 years ago now. So.
And having sort of the broader view of crypto media, what sort of job do you think crypto media is doing? Because I think people who aren't in the media often accuse the media of being biased, and often correctly, but I think even more so in crypto media, it's like, you hate Ripple, or you own this currency, or whatever it is. Do you find it sort of hard to get it across at your objective? And what do you think of the perceptions of people in crypto media?
I think, you've got kind of the spectrum. There are definitely places where what's being printed probably is low in accuracy, and as we know, there have been reports showing that there's a lot of pay to play in the media, which I'm sure you guys have been approached. Obviously, I've been approached. Although some of that actually, and I don't know if this is going to sound un-PC, but because this is a global movement and you've got teams from other countries where the norms around journalism are a little bit different, I've tended to notice that a lot of those offers actually come from foreign crypto projects.
Where pay to play is normal.
Exactly. So, so I think sometimes there's like a cultural misunderstanding there. But then at the other end of the spectrum, I do think that there are legitimate outlets that are covering this space, but they could do so probably with a measure of temperance. And like we saw in the craze in 2017, there were some outlets that seemed to practically be trying to feed the frenzy. And I just thought, oh my God, their audience is just going to lose so much money. Like, why are they doing this? There should be a lot of caveats to what they're saying. So it really runs the gamut.
What are your visions for the long-term prospects of the media industry? We've seen, Facebook has come along. Media outlets were reliant on Facebook for traffic. Very recently, CCN, which is a crypto media outlet, they said that Google's tweaked algorithm had basically forced them to shut down. I think they're back in business, but there is this reliance on big centralized entities. Do you see that changing? And is cryptocurrency going to enable media to sprout up into like a beautiful blog universe again?
For sure, the lessons of the media industry, that's just something that I just frankly think about all the time. Like, what if someday there's kind of like the Google of podcast ads, and they tweak something and suddenly my revenue plummets? Like I'm thinking about stuff like this already quite a bit, and that's why I'm like trying to diversify already. But in terms of like
in what ways are you diversifying?
Like I did my first live event earlier this year. Learned a lot of lessons. Did not actually diversify the revenue, but know going forward how to make that happen. And yeah, I would say that as for whether or not the crypto ecosystem can come up with something that can help save media, like it would be great if that happened, but am I gonna bank on that? Like, probably not. I've had multiple people suggest that I launch my own coin, and I'm a little bit like, Do you guys know how this stuff works? Because I don't think that's a very good idea. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Although
But
I did hear something really encouraging. I was talking to the CTO of Ripple at a conference the other day, and I still have micropayments in my mind because I wrote about it recently and how they've promised us for 10 years it would happen. Just to see an article on the internet, be able to pay 50 cents, without friction, just something in your browser. And apparently, crypto is going to make that easier, but he was talking about the idea of being able to stream payments. So you'd have like your crypto wallets, and you go to the article, and the longer you stay there, the more it would stream. We're just talking about like thousandths of a cent per second or something like that. And he seemed to be thinking that the infrastructure's all there, and in a year or two we could see that, which I think could be an enormous boon to media. But
it does sound promising. I do wonder if that kind of thing, though, will be quite similar to the way that Spotify has been for a lot of musicians, where they were promised, this long tail of payments, and essentially it's basically decimated a lot of their income, except for maybe some of the really, really popular artists. Like for instance, on my website, I have a little thing where you can tip me using the Lightning Network. And I think so far I've made like 42 cents or something, and it's literally just, people giving me fractions of a penny. And so it's super funny. I'm a little bit like, okay, if this is the future of micropayments, then I'm definitely not going to bank on that. So we'll see. It does sound promising, but like I said, it might be one of those things that only works for certain breakout stars.
Mm-hmm. Over the years, you've probably interviewed dozens or hundreds of crypto figures. Do you have any one episode that really stands out, or do you have like a favorite guest of all time?
My favorite guest was probably CZ of Binance. I had a lot of very tough questions for him about his strategy of regulatory arbitrage, and also about the fact that the SEC will claim jurisdiction if he's serving U.S. investors. And he really pushed back at me. He was not cowed in any way, and so there's just something very pleasurable about that experience of kind of giving somebody a tough question and having them come right back at you with the strength of their convictions, and he did that, and so it was actually a very entertaining episode, but also kind of got you thinking a little bit about what is the point of these regulations and stuff like that. And so he made some really good points from an intellectual standpoint as well.
What is your take on how the U.S. is approaching regulations here? A lot of the people we interview are usually treading on eggshells, and they don't want to rock the boat too much and upset the SEC because they're like, we're totally compliant, don't worry about us. But what is your take on it as a sort of impartial observer of this industry?
Oh, wow. That is such a difficult question. I really could see it both ways. And the reason why I say that is I think the way that it goes is that the SEC is just enforcing the law that they have at the moment, but they don't make laws. And so that really can't happen until probably something like a court case, or maybe if Congress passes something like the Token Taxonomy Act. And so at the moment, the way they're going about it, it's sort of, I wouldn't say in a vacuum necessarily, but with the tools they have, they're doing sort of what they're supposed to be doing. However, that could change if there's an act of Congress that says, no, there's going to be these other rules, or if a court decision rules a certain way, then there could be a completely different law that the SEC would have to enforce. So in that regard, it's hard for me to say what is the right thing to do. I really see it from both sides. Totally get that a lot of the teams are trying to leave the U.S. and just as an American, I'm like, hey, wait, these teams are actually American. They should be here. There's all this talent here that's leaving. But on the other side, we were just talking about the mania of 2017. I've literally had my own friends lose money in this space, and it's something that I know is a concern, and it's a big problem. And we saw all the scammers and everything. So I also see the SEC side. So I'm not giving you a good answer. It's one of those things where, there's just really good arguments on both sides. So it's hard to make a call.
You're working on a book, right? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah. I consider my book to maybe tell what I would call the second chapter of crypto history. So if the first chapter is, how Bitcoin got started, which was a great story told by Nathaniel Popper in Digital Gold. People should all read that if they haven't read it. That book actually ends in March 2014, so there's been quite a bit that's happened since then. And I would say that what really happened in the second chapter is that we saw that finally this world hit the mainstream in a way, and from that point forward, people kind of recognized, okay, this is here to stay. Something's going to happen. And granted, we, as I mentioned, we don't have usability, but they could kind of see the potential, and they at least were speculating on it. And so my book kind of tells the story of how we reached that point. But it won't be out for like 2 years, so I guess get your pre-orders in.
You'll time it right to the next bubble, right?
Yeah, probably, hopefully, fingers crossed. It is coming out after the halving, so that's a good signal.
Thanks so much for coming, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Jeff Roberts.
I'm Robert Hackett. Come to fortune.com for more Balancing the Ledger.
See you next time.